Hey guys! So, today we are going to talk about lifting and shifting refactoring, or lift and shift refactors. So let's get into it. Now, what is a lift and shift, or a lift and shift refactor? Well, let me tell you. You see, something that you will probably face at one point or another is that you're going to have to refactor an old piece of software, what we call legacy code. Now, this is a great and fun thing because you're getting to make something that is not so nice into something nicer. However, your first instinct, most likely, is going to be to try and make it nicer right off the bat. This is a mistake. Please let me explain. You see, one of the biggest problems with legacy is that it's very complicated. It's something that is ugly that you want to make into something nicer, but we must ask the fundamental question: how did things get to this point? Because legacy doesn't just spring up from nowhere. There's a reason why it's there to begin with. Now, there might be many reasons, but the most common one, in my experience, is that the code is simply complicated. And over time, you neglect to make things nicer, you don't invest time into structuring things correctly, and the problem grows. And legacy grows and grows over time because the cost, or the perceived cost at least, of fixing things at a given time is too high. The cost-value ratio is off. It's more work to make it nice than it is to simply shim something in and to add to that complexity. Now, when you come to that piece of software and you're supposed to refactor it, and the job that you're facing is to actually refactor, you will very quickly notice that if you're trying to refactor all the things, odds are, depending on how connected this piece of software is to everything else. If you're really lucky, it's very isolated. You can kind of move it around and it's really about grunt work. But if you're really unlucky, which is the case for me, currently at my job, it's a very central piece of the software, which means that when you start refactoring things, you will very quickly notice that, oh, damn, this is connected into that, and that's connected into that, and it's all connected into that, which means that when you try to just restructure the thing as you're refactoring, you notice that things start just breaking over and over and over, and you get limited. You go and most likely you're gonna either have to work all the way through until you refactor all the things, or until you reach that magical moment where you realize, damn, I can't change this. What do I do? And that's when the lift and shift comes into play. Now, Martin Fowler has a concept that I think is really great. It's something that you should carry with you, and it's called basically the rule of the hat, or the hat rule. I don't know exactly what the term is, but the idea is that you can only wear one hat at a time. In other words, you have roughly 3 types of hats. You have the developer hat, you have the refactor hat, and you have the tester hat. What does this mean? This means that when you are programming, when you are developing and you're writing software, that's the thing you do. You're writing software. But when you want to refactor something, you take off the programmer hat and you simply use the refactor hat. In other words, you are not allowed to change anything about the implementation. You can at no point when you're refactoring change the behavior. You're not allowed to change the code. You're not allowed to restructure things. You are about refactoring things. You are about maintaining the exact same structure, same type of piece of logic, but you are there to make it nicer. That's it. And when you have the testing hat, it's the same thing. You are not a developer, you are not a refactor person, you are simply testing the thing. You're just verifying that it works. That's it. The reason why you want to have this approach is because, as I explained earlier, if you have the idea that when you are refactoring that you're going to be a coder at the same time, then you're going to try to optimize things. And when you are refactoring something to start off with, odds are that you are simply going to get yourself tangled up in a mess. You're going to try to refactor and code at the same time. And that's not going to work most of the time. You're simply going to realize, as I said, that you can't change it, and you're going to waste a bunch of time trying to do that. So what is the lift and shift? Well, the lift and shift is the idea that you look at what you have today And when you're refactoring something, you're basically just trying to make it nicer. In my scenario, I'm trying to refactor a single language implementation of a project into something that will scale to X amount of markets and countries and so forth, basically making a single language application into an international application. That's my focus, which means that when I refactor this, the goal for me is not to make this ugly piece of software, quote unquote, into something nicer. It's about figuring out how can I make this current implementation that will not scale to that many countries scale. That's the entire goal. My refactor is not about making the whole code base nicer. It's about figuring out how to scale it up to a lot of countries. So that's where the lift and shift comes in. That means that now my focus is not to make the code itself nicer. It is about lifting the current implementation and just shifting it and putting it in another structure so that it will scale up to multiple markets. And that's what I'm doing. And it's going fairly well. As I can tell you right now that the code changes that I've made to the project are very minor, but now the project will actually scale. Now, the code itself is still ugly. It's a subjective thing, of course, but I mean, I didn't make the code nicer. But here's the beauty of this, because now I have achieved the goal that my story is about, like the work that I'm supposed to be doing. It's now achieved. I have lifted and shifted. I now know that it's refactored, this code is structured so that we can scale it up. Now, I can start asking the question, okay, how can I make this nicer? How can I improve this implementation? I'm taking off my refactor hat, putting on my programmer hat, because I've already done the refactor now. And now I go back to trying to optimize things. That's the mindset. And I can only tell you that this works extremely well for refactor, and take it from somebody who's done quite a few refactors on a few really large projects with some of the most horrendous legacy code I've ever seen. Don't try to optimize while you're refactoring. Do a lift and shift first, and make sure that the goal of the refactor, that you have a goal. I hope you're not refactoring just for the sake. You're not doing that, right? You're not just refactoring for the sake of refactoring, because remember, every time you change code, you bring a bit of risk with you. So you have to make sure that the refactor that you are making is worth the investment. If it is, just go for it. But as I said, refactor first and then code. Refactor, code. Refactor, code. Don't try to do both at the same time, because trust me, odds are that you are going to break things. That's at least from my experience. Have a great day.